I'm James Tehrani, and this is Workforce on Location. Today, I have Brian Kropp here, and he is the HR practice leader at the CEB. And lucky enough for us, right next door, they're hosting a conference. It's called ReimagineHR, Building the HR Function of the Future. And we asked Brian to come over here and tell us a little bit about the conference and kind of what the scuttle is on the street.
Yeah, for sure. So it's actually a really exciting event that we're hosting. We've got about almost 700 HR executives, senior HR executives, so chief learning officers, heads of HR, VPs of talent management, and so on. And don't quite call Guinness, but as best as we can figure, it's the biggest event where it's been truly senior HR executives in the same place at the same time that's ever been done. And
that's a lot of engagement there.
That's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, and there's a set of themes that we're seeing really coming out of the conversations we're having with executives about the fact that the HR function of the future and how we operate as an entity is going to look really different along a set of very powerful and very important dimensions.
Can you give me a few examples of how it will look different?
Sure. One is just the analytic transformation of HR. We all have technology systems, we've got applicant tracking systems, HRS systems, all sorts of things that are producing enormous amounts of data. But we're really not getting the full value out of that data. So just a really interesting comparison for you. The average person who plays fantasy football has access to more information, better information, and spends more time looking at data to make decisions on who's going to be on their fantasy football team than the average HR executive.
Wow.
So that just puts it in context. Even though we have all of the data, we're really not using it well enough to make smart decisions about how we work and operate and run our company.
So what are some things HR managers, CHROs can do to use it better?
Yeah, here's just a great example of one of the things that we're seeing. Almost everybody has an engagement survey or some variation of that. There's some companies that are actually starting to use those engagement surveys not just to get a sense of what's going on with their workforce. Is this business unit more engaged versus that business unit? They're using it as an input into broader business decision making. So for example, this one company, when they're deciding where to roll out a new product, they'll look at the market size, they'll look at the competitive nature in that market, wherever it might be, but then they'll also look at how engaged the sales force is. And when they're rolling out new products, they always pick it in places where the sales force is more highly engaged. And the belief being, if your sales force isn't caring about it and passionate about it, it's not going to work anyway. So that's an important differentiator of whether or not your business is going to be successful. So that's just an example of how companies are starting to use data, talent data, to make different business decisions that really lead to better organizational outcomes.
Now let me ask you this. Are HR managers too worried about engagement? Ever since I've been covering the field, I've been hearing, we got to get people more engaged. We have to worry about engagement. We have to measure engagement. Are they spending too much time worrying about engagement?
Well, it's interesting. Engagement is a good thing, and more engagement is better than less. Right. But you have to ask yourself a question, what are we going to do with a more engaged workforce?
Sure.
And there's two other factors that we found that are actually really important. One is your workforce actually aligned with what you're trying to accomplish. You can have a lot of engaged people that are rowing the boat really hard, but if you're not all rowing in the same direction, then what good do you have? You're just got a boat going around in circles, basically, right? So you need to be aligned. The second thing that you have to do, though, is actually be agile in terms of what's going on. Businesses change so fast, organizations change so fast, that if your workforce can't then respond to those changes and move in a different way, work in a different way, be part of a new system, that even if they're engaged, you're not actually going to achieve business outcomes.
Sure.
So the way that we think about it, it's not just having a more engaged workforce is good or bad. It's what do you actually want to accomplish with your workforce? Are you trying to be a low-cost provider? Are you trying to be more innovative? Are you trying to move into new global markets? What is the business problem you're trying to solve? And then how do you manage your workforce to actually help you achieve those business objectives? Depending upon what that looks like, different levels of engagement, alignment, or agility are going to matter more or less depending upon the business problem you're trying to solve.
Okay. When you come up with a name like ReimagineHR, it sort of gives the impression that there's something broken. Is HR broken?
You know, I think the world has changed, and HR needs to respond to how that world's changed. So, I'll give you some 4 examples.
Sure.
There's 2 just really high-level macro trends that are occurring. One is that talent is the most important differentiator of organizational performance. There's just some recent data for that. PwC does an annual CEO survey where they ask, what is the biggest issue that you're facing as an organization? What is the biggest concern that you have as a CEO? about whether or not your organization will be successful. In 2010, it's about 32% of CEOs said it was talent. Today, it's almost 80%. So that's different. The second thing that's different is that we now live in a world where change is constant. And, apologies to Benjamin Franklin, who said that the only things we knew with certainty were death and taxes.
Sure.
There's a third thing we know with certainty now, which is death, taxes, and change. We don't know. We don't know what the change is going to be. We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know where it's going to occur, but we know it's going to happen. And in fact, 99% of organizations have had some major organizational change in the last 3 years. So think of big acquisition, big reorganization, and so on. And almost every organization has had multiple ones of those. So you've got these two big themes of talent is becoming more important and a bigger differentiator, and change is constant. And because of that, our long cycle, static, often slow-moving HR policies aren't responsive enough and aren't able to adjust enough to actually make sure our businesses are successful. So I don't know if we go so far to say that HR is broken, but I think what we would say is as we look into the future, HR is going to have to work differently than it did before because the analytic part of it,
Sure.
Work is changing, becoming more collaborative, a variety of other factors that are there. And so that's why, we debated with the title, should we say, HR is broken, we need a new one, or how do we take what we've got and take it apart and put it back together in new and imaginative ways? And that's why we think Reimagine is the right way to
Excellent. Well, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate you joining me today. If you have a question, you can email me at editors@workforce.com or always tweet to me at @WorkforceJames. Again, Brian Kropp, the HR practice leader at the CEB. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.